Wow, that was a great song, Luke. And welcome back to Mental Health Matters with Dr. Scott Terry. Today's show, we're continuing on with this notion of music and emotion and what we're craving in our lives today. We got a full house today. David's going to talk to us about music. And David, you also do a show here, right, at KRUU. We are on KRUU, Solar Power, KRUU, 101.1 in your FM dial.
Yeah, my name's Luke Davids, and I have a show called The Inspiration Initiative here on air as well.
When is that broadcast?
That broadcasts Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Saturdays at 4 p.m. at rebroadcast.
Oh, okay. So mine's are Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m., and then I'm a little bit after you then on Thursdays at 12:30.
Cool.
So
and that's Central Time for those guys here.
Yes. And if you happen to not be here and you want to listen to shows, you could go to KRUUFM.com and see some of the archives there. You could also go to Ardent Center's website. That's www.ardentcenter.com. And we have them on podcast and YouTube there. And you could also check them out on YouTube. Just go to Ardent Counseling Center, and look us up there. Anyways, we also have David, another David from last time, is sitting with us again. David, introduce yourself. And Margot?
David Lee Shengton, I'm a health and lifestyle consultant.
And you also deal with wrote a really interesting book on emotions. Yeah,
Master Your Emotions.
And that's why it fits right in with when we're talking about emotions and music. And Margot?
Oh, I'm a singer and a writer, and I play some guitar. It's Margot Baum.
Fantastic. So, Luke, so let's get into this notion of the show today, because last time we talked about this notion that you create a transformation for yourself in utilizing music, and went through this transition period where you didn't want to do negative music anymore. You wanted to do more uplifting music that sings to your soul, if I could even say that.
That's right. And I think it's a nice segue from the song we started the show off with, because I think once you develop that state of being or that approach to the world that is more of a positive nature, and something I want to harp on again that David brought up in the last show, which I really love, is that idea of surrender and that idea of flow. And once I got into that, once I was a little practiced in that, I noticed that life was just so much more simple than before. There was not as many fluctuating emotions. There weren't as many confrontations. Life just felt so much smoother. And I think that was the message I was trying to get across in that song with the lyrics, is that there's such a simpler approach to life.
Yeah, it's so nice, because when we start to get deep within our own self, what I call getting connected to your divinity, your divine nature, then you really get in harmony with how nature operates. And nature is not a complicated thing. In fact, some of the greatest tunes are very simple tunes, very simple lyrics, but they touch you on a deep level. And as I said in the last show, it's about symphony, and it's also about how you can connect emotionally with the people. So here, you have rhythm, which is the symphony itself moving. And then you have now the expression of that symphony in terms of how the artist intonate the same words, so that he or she is actually bringing their own feelings and emotion. So when you find an artist who is more settled within themselves, operating from that level of their being, then you find a more positive, easy flow in the way they sing, in the way they express, and the feelings that they put. There's more love and fulfillment rather than hate and violence.
And I think it's often easy to overlook when that's happening on stage. I think as a listener, maybe sometimes we're drawn to these performers, but we're not really sure why. We just, in a general sense, we're like, oh, they make me feel good. But sometimes we don't see the immense amount of transformational work that went on behind the scenes for that artist to reach that state where they can be more in a state of flow and let that inspiration come out on stage.
And I think what's really interesting also, this sort of segues into this other part that we're talking about, is what is music? How do we allow music to transform our lives or to reflect or react? We had done a show a while back talking about being proactive versus reactive. And so if I'm sad, maybe I put on music that isn't just sad to reinforce my sadness, but maybe I put on music that is more uplifting because I am choosing to move out of that state of being.
That's so great. And I think it applies to all mediums as well, especially movies. Movies are another powerful way that we're affected emotionally. But I had that same thought, and that's actually something I wanted to talk with you about, was that it's a conscious decision, and it takes a little bit of self-reflection to notice how you're being affected by the music or the media that you are focusing on or letting yourself be exposed to. And I think an interesting practice might be for some people just to pick maybe 3 songs and listen to the whole song. Take note of how you're feeling before you listen to the song, and then just really easily take note of how you're feeling after listening to the song. And my bet is that you'll be able to tell way before the song ends how it's affecting you emotionally.
Well, and again, sometimes we want to entrench more of that emotionality to what we're experiencing. We don't sort of believe what we're almost experiencing, and we almost need to make things worse for ourselves. I mean, I once saw this veteran, and he was his life wasn't as quite as he wanted, but it was just a little bummed out, and he was doing things because he had really bad PTSD. He was doing some really positive things. He had stopped drinking. He was in a relationship that was solid. But, there were some difficulties. But, it's life. He had a solid job that he was doing. And he was working out regularly. And the thing that actually I know this is weird in Fairfield, but actually the transcendental meditation was the most powerful thing, especially for PTSD, that you could imagine somebody doing. But because something wasn't quite right and he couldn't identify it, he almost wanted to make it worse so that he could know what he was experiencing. So he wanted to watch that movie American Sniper because he was over there and he was a sniper and he wanted to see how real it was, but he also knew what it was going to do with him. And he added that to starts drinking and stopped doing the meditation, which was helping him, and starts creating more fights. And all of a sudden, he goes from being bummed out to being practically suicidal.
Yep.
And, we've all done this. We've all had breakups, and we want sad music to reinforce that instead of going, I've been sad enough. I'm ready to start moving out of that shift. I don't need to reinforce what I'm experiencing, but allow myself to take that emotion and do something more with that. I have choice. And I can't, as me and David were talking before, we can't choose if we're in a wheelchair. We can choose what we're going to do with that wheelchair that we're in. Right? So we all have bad experiences, but that's not what defines us. What defines us is how we, as they say, get up again. One of my favorite songs as a therapist was Chumbawanga. Do you remember that song? When I get knocked down, I get up again.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that song as a therapist. I would say that to everybody because that's it. It's not about getting knocked down. It's what we do to get up again and create a new life and create a new transformation.
Yeah.
And so how are we using music? So this is what I'm interested from you, Luke, is how are you using music for yourself? Not necessarily even as an artist, but just as somebody who's deeply attuned to music being your medium.
I think it all started with what we were speaking about before, with just becoming more conscious of how music is affecting your emotions. And then I sort of have a playlist. I have a morning playlist on my iPod that I like to listen to in the morning. It's kind of calm, and it's a nice way to sort of ease into the day. And I've noticed that listening to this music, one of them is actually a classical piece. It's a piano concerto by Chopin. And I notice, listening to it, that it just brings up these feelings of appreciation and of gratitude. And when I'm listening to this, if I'm just sitting and not, distracted in any other way, I find my mind drifting to things that I'm thankful for, which is really a wonderful thing when you're just listening to music. It's not like you have to really work at it, It's just taking you there naturally.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually want to ask Margot a question. So, Margot, you love music as well, and music has really made a huge difference in your life.
Yes.
As somebody who sings and somebody who's so attuned to others, because you really are somebody who lives through others a lot in this beautiful way. And do you find yourself either getting trapped in the notion of music, that negative music, or using music as a way to help you change and grow?
Well, I think
or sing about
I think
even.
earlier on in my life, I might have done the negative where I found music to help me feel more sad. But I think in my own growth of consciousness that it got to the point where it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I would, if I feel sad sometimes, I will look for music that actually uplifts me instead of pulling me back down, because I want to make that conscious choice. And I think it's wonderful what Luke is doing, where he's shifting this so that there's more positive music for people to turn to. Because I think one of the things is we hear a lot of sad music and things that aren't necessarily transformative to us. So if more and more people are having the inner experience of transformation and writing music that shows that, then other people can choose to listen to that instead of things that are going to take them down.
Yeah, and so, but the point is it comes back to us, that we get the choice. What are we doing with what we're experiencing in this life? And how are we using the tools? Music is this wonderful tool to create this change, And I just love this idea of how we allow that to happen. By the way, you're listening to Mental Health Matters with Dr. Scott Terry, and today we're with the two Davids again, talking about music and emotion and transformation. And Margot is so wonderful to sit in with us today, and we're talking about this notion of how we can use music or any medium, as you so said, movies or whatever it is, to create tools in our life to create change, and to sometimes we're picking things to reinforce. I mean, I have clients that are into the hen banging, hard thrashing music, and it's interesting to look at them going, but that's not who they are anymore, and yet that's how their crowd is, but the music doesn't reflect what they're wanting to change into. So what allows them to change and be who they need to be?
I think I wanted to bring it back to the point you were making with the story you told about the veteran, that I think, at least for me, I got to a point where I just said, enough is enough. I was definitely reinforcing emotional states that I didn't prefer with the music that I was listening to, because, and sort of my justification for it was, this is really artistic, there's so much angst here, there's so much emotion, and there's a lot of momentum in a lot of songs, but which way is the momentum headed, and which way are you wanting to go? And that's something that I got to a point,
choosing to go,
exactly,
choosing to create that direction to go.
Yeah, this is such an important point that we are speaking about, because Luke is fortunate that he was able to recognize that he needed to change. Most people, as you would know, Scott, who are trapped on that emotional roller coaster, they need what I call a sweet itch. They need to dig the hole a little deeper to go into. And as they're doing that, they are getting pleasure in a negative way.
Yes,
they're getting their own level of fulfillment. The more I hurt, it's good for me. There's sort of like, justification. So you listen to the sad song, you just had a breakup, and you want to listen to that sad song, even though it's going to make you cry and create pain. You want to go there because you feel that you need to be the victim and feel the pain. This is where people like Scott comes in, because some people cannot break out of that on their own. They need a therapist. They need a coach who can say, hey, you got to take stock and don't be reactive, and show them and give them the tools to be proactive.
Right. Or sometimes, again, the point is not to not listen to sad music if you're
No.
breaking up, because sometimes you need to process
Yes.
through. But sometimes you've done the process, and now you're just that sweet itch where you're just hurting yourself, and enough's enough. It's time. You've cried your eyes out. It's time to
Time to
wake
move
up,
on.
get time to move on. You could always cry. There's always time to cry, more time to cry in your life. The crying will never go away if you don't want it to, but it's time to get up and do something and create the world you want to create.
Beautiful. And that's why in my book I speak about conscious transformation. Because to change, to really change, you have to make a conscious effort. It can't be on its own. Sometimes it happens spontaneously, but most of the time, somewhere in you have to decide that this is enough. Or someone brings you to that realization, hey, you got to move your butt, you got to get off, and make the change if you continue to stay there. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom in order to make that change.
Yeah, and I really love that you brought up that point, Scott, about that sometimes it's really helpful, actually, in the processing of emotion. And then it's really noticing when you're done with that and when it's time to move on.
It's that noticing, it's that awareness, and just getting, one, you have awareness, two, what are you making that awareness mean, right? So we have experience. What am I making that experience mean? And then what can I create from this? And so maybe you recognize, yes, I need to sit with this emotion for a few more minutes. But you are the one choosing where it goes, what happens, what I make it happen, what I do with this. And that's the bigger point. It's not sad music is bad.
Right.
It's, and you should only listen to uplifting music. No, or uplifting music, movies or whatever it is, right? It's you are the one who gets to choose what you're creating.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to make one point on this also, because sometimes when we think in terms of music, we generally think in terms of lyrics. But a lot of times, the music that change you may have no lyrics to it. It is the symphony. It is the rhythm. It is how it moves in flow with nature that brings an uplifting feeling. So it could be just an instrumental piece. As you were speaking, when you listen to those classics, they're not really words as such. It's a piano piece or a flautist or something like that. But the way it's done, it moves the emotion because we are song vibrating at different frequencies.
Yeah.
And if that frequency can create harmony within us and make the rhythms that have us distorted inside more balanced, it's almost like when you put on this piece of music, it's like a synthesizer that now takes all the discordant notes that you have inside yourself and smooth it out. Does that make sense?
That's so beautiful. I think you just hit on the heart of why music is so powerful. And I think in that state, when it is instrumental, when there are no lyrics, or often I've noticed that when I listen to songs that are in other languages and I can't tell what they're saying, often I get a much deeper emotional response from that because it takes that cerebral aspect out of it and you're just feeling what
yes.
Or you could experience something through the musician. I just heard a couple months ago this wonderful piece talking about Keith Jarrett's music, the famous jazz pianist. And they were talking about his most famous album. And what was interesting about it is that it wasn't supposed to be. That this album was never supposed to be. That basically Keith Jarrett had this incredibly famous, one of the most famous, and certainly now the most famous jazz musician. And he had gone to Europe and was going to play this concert that people had begged him to go. And he was there, and they had a piano that wasn't tuned, and it wasn't correct, and the keys were stuck, and it was like every disaster upon disaster. And he said, I am going to record this to show what shouldn't happen, to show disaster. And what it forced him to do is to be able to transcend, in that literal sense, the instrument itself. and the key, and you hear him at times go, ugh, and it's like deep emotion as he's like pounding the keys because literally the keys won't make sense.
Wow.
And it's just this incredible experience. And I heard the music again, and I started to cry. And I was like, oh my God. And I could feel his emotions and what he was trying to bring out of his frustration and to move past the music itself into another dimension. And I think that's what's so powerful for all of us to think, what are we creating? What do we want to create with what's around us? Again, it's our choice, given our own limitations. And there's always going to be limitations. And he had the limitation, this great pianist, with a piano that didn't work. And yet, what did he create? The most famous jazz album ever. And it's like you transforming yourself out of the negative emotions into something like, no, I want something different for me. And it was for you, not even for your listening audience.
Mm-hmm. Right, in the beginning it was, yeah.
This topic is so beautiful, and it just brought to mind as we were talking the effect of Vedic songs, and because Vedic songs, when you listen to them, they're in their true sense, they're meaningless, but the effect on the physiology is so powerful, and that you can just close your eyes and just listen to this specific chanting, and it transforms your physiology.
Well, yeah, I've really been enjoying this Maharishi Veda app. Margot, I know you've heard that. How do you pronounce it? Because maybe I'm not pronouncing it as clearly.
No, that's correct. It's Maharishi Veda app. Yeah, you can get it on your phone. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, and you can get it on your phone.
Oh, that's where I use it. Yeah.
Oh, and so yes, there are places to get different kinds of medium. Anyways, to close out today, is there something else you'd like to say? And then I'll leave David with the final word here.
Yeah, I'd like to say that. This form of music that moves you is there in every culture and every religion.
Yes, absolutely.
Recently, I was watching something that dealt with Muslim religion, and I was listening to some of the powerful chants, and you can actually almost feel yourself. I don't know what they're saying, but you could feel yourself almost drifting because of the way the music, and it all has to do with the rhythm, and the symphony and the harmony with nature.
Absolutely. Margot, anything else you'd like to say? Thank you so much. And, I think it's true. What are we doing with that sound within ourselves? So, final word?
Yeah, I think in summary, the point to take away for all of us is that it's that conscious choice that we have what music we're going to utilize as a tool to affect our emotions in whatever way we want to.
Or whatever medium.
Exactly.
I love how you said this. And you're going to play for us another piece of music?
Absolutely, yeah. This is an original song that I wrote to kind of remind everyone that it's more about relaxing back into your true nature than trying to create something out of nothing. It's a song called You Are Love.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thank you, Margot. Wonderful show as always. You guys are fantastic. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
Great transformation, everyone out there. Bye.
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 Bye.